The standards are extremely high, which I think is very important, and that goes for everything to do with the production.
Quite punctual starts, and everyone wants to go away and do some research, I guess, because obviously that's quite a big part of Judith's process.
I think Judith really does give an actor so much to play with. She gives you so much background history, and you just feel you naturally progress into the play with you could just feel it amongst everybody else as well.
A few days into the rehearsal process, when we've discussed each word of the play very thoroughly, is when we are asked to imagine maybe a timeline for the characters, or maybe 5 events that have happened, imaginary, in the character's life so far, and then we all come together and input all of these things, and it's very interesting then what can happen.
And it built up like a big background story for yourself, which is really worthwhile. You didn't realise in the beginning how helpful that was, but it sort of gave you sort of depth and sort of confidence to, when you actually got to the text then, that you had all this sort of background stuff behind you.
What I've always enjoyed about working with Judith is that she has a very broad knowledge of classical music, which is my particular area, but also a number of other styles such as jazz and pop music. And she's very clear about what she wants, and she has the depth of references to articulate what she wants.
The last show that I did, the House Bernarda Alba, we actually, because there was a lot of stuff to do with sticks and stuff, we actually did a lot of exercises in the morning, every morning to begin with, to do with stick work. It's something that Judith had explored previously. And to begin with, I remember being very kind of nervous and just passing from one of us to another, and by the end of the whole rehearsal session, literally throwing the sticks across the room, and that was really kind of freeing, I think, and I think it kind of benefited the whole process, because relationships develop just from this stick throwing.
Because it was such an emotional piece, so highly charged emotionally, constantly. It's like constantly boiling at boiling point. It was great to have that feeling in the rehearsal room of you could do anything, you could try anything, and that's something which is vital, really, because if you feel under threat, or if you feel as if you're doing something wrong, or if you're going to be criticised, straight away you feel, oh God, okay, just you lose all your confidence then, and it just it disappears. But there was a real sense when we were rehearsing that of being able to you could always go for it.
Anything else on Endgame to talk about? Well, I think it's something we can. That sort of, it's something that's apparent sort of every time we work together. I think it's this sort of pinpointing sort of places or times or somewhere that we can both reference throughout the whole thing, and so that's sort of more interesting. And I think Endgame is quite interesting, but also sort of.
I think it's talking about it with the Misanthrope as well, in that, but the fact that we looked at what was real and then distilled it, which is what happens with Siwan as well, and indeed the Lorca.
And it's about how to get that, because I think that's really important, because that's for me what it's kind of mainly about as well.
Yeah.
To sort of, well, certainly that's the unusual thing about working with you. There's always this sort of heart to it.
Judith sets goals which are challenging and inspiring. Her choice of texts are in themselves an opportunity to work in different styles. Judith appreciates the techniques required, as she herself has been an actress, and is always supportive and encouraging. I feel free, I feel I can be vulnerable. It's safe to experiment and fail in rehearsal.
Judith's very open to discussing character. So when you get nearer to the performance, you've really talked in depth about who your character is, what your relationships are, and the subtext.
To grow and develop, you need a freedom that's not constricted by the director's fears. Working with Judith allows you to follow your instincts and, under her guidance, work in a collaborative way.
And another thing about Judith as well is that if things aren't working out, I find that she's very, very patient and expresses herself in a positive way, which is a real pleasure to work with. Sometimes, and understandably, directors can get frustrated, and it can be a long road to get to where you want and to be on the same page. And what's very important, I think, for a director is to be able to express that positively through the various frustrations. I've known other directors who, God knows, can only express themselves negatively. That's their way of doing things. And it's a hard way of working, because you're constantly aware of what it is that you're not doing, rather than what you are doing, or what you're doing right, or the good things that you're doing. So Judith has always been very positive in that sense, so that I knew that even when we didn't have it yet, that she was very positive and appreciative, and that is something which can make it a lot easier and can facilitate the process.
The thing I remember most about the project was the process, which was especially enjoyable because we all got on extremely well, and there was a lot of exchange of ideas, and the three of us, Judith, Jenny Kagan and I, always met together as a threesome.
When you work with Judith, you feel valued through the value that she gives to her work and in the way she values you as a person and a performer.
Within the space of a 12-month, I saw two contrasting productions directed by Judith Roberts. Both were pieces of classical theatre, but what made them memorable was the central performances of the two actors, which would have graced, dare we say it, the stage of the National Theatre in London. In fact, had they been in the English language, then the performances would have been lauded to the skies by the British press.
The directorial craft at work there, in terms of making sure that it spoke at all the levels at which the audience experienced it. It was a trusting in the vision of the dramatists who had written the work, and also a great attention to and a love of the medium through which the communication happened.